Good to see you once again as we continue our wonderful journey in core mathematics. My name is Nana Yodu, and you can call me Senana. Remember to like, share, comment, click on the notification bell, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get all videos on time. In our previous lesson, we've looked at how we can perform operations on vectors, and specifically we looked at how we can multiply a vector by a scale factor. In this lesson, we are going to look at a very interesting concept of trigonometry, and you'll see how interrelated vectors, bearings, and trigonometry is to our real life. Remember to always have your jotter and write and take notes and perform a lot of examples on your own. And then remember that whenever you are walking around, think mathematics, think around your daily life so that maths will be fun for you. Now let's consider the concept of trigonometry. So for trigonometry, we see it as a study that looks at the relationship between the sides and angles of a triangle, right? So the sides and the angles of a triangle, and particularly the right angle triangle. So we know the right angle triangle. We've done a lot of extensive study on the right angle triangle. So when you have an angle of 90 degree in a triangle, then we have a right angle triangle, right? So when we have this, we are easily able to see some kind of relations between the angles that are made here, right? And then the angle here with the sides that are here, A, B, and C. So those relations is what we call trigonometry, the study of those relations, right? So it helps us to be able to find the measure of unknown dimensions of triangle using formulas and identities based on the relationship that this right angle triangle has. So basically, the term trigon and then metron, right? Those are the two words that were used to form trigonometry, right? So interesting fact, if you want to look at how trigonometry was formed, it was formed from the word trigon, and trigon refers to triangle, right? And the metron means measure. So when we put the two together, we get trigonometry. So it's not like a word that you can say that, oh, this is something that is out of the blue moon or something we cannot probably relate with. And then we want to look at trigonometric ratios. These are very important things. So how we can be able to determine the angle, right? So the angle here, which is theta here, in relation to the sides, probably if we label these as A, B, and C, how we can determine the angle and the ratios in relation to the sides here. So let's consider that. So basically when we look at a triangle, let's draw a right angle triangle. So this is a sketch of a right angle triangle, right? So we have our 90-degree angle here, and then we call the angle here theta, right? And then let's call this side A, and then this side B, and then this side C, right? So based on trigonometric ratios, if we would want to look at the sine of the angle theta, right, we are considering the opposite side, which is here, of the angle, and the longest side, which is called the hypotenuse side of the angle. So that should be equal to A over C, right? If we consider the cosine of the angle theta, then we are considering the adjacent side. So adjacent to an angle is a one that the angle lies on. So the side here, right, which is a B here, all over the hypotenuse here, right? So that should be B all over C, right? And then when we consider the tangent of the angle theta, then we are considering the opposite side, which is here, right? And then all over adjacent, which is the side here, right? So A all over B. So we have a relation where sometimes we can use a short form where we call it SOHCAHTOA. So when you hear something like SOHCAHTOA, it's just an acronym that helps us to be able to identify these relations. So these relations have been established as a result of being able to establish a relationship that exists between the angle of a right angle triangle and the sides A, B, and C. So it means that for our sine, which is a way to be able to get the angle here, when we want to consider the sine of the angle, sine would refer to having the opposite angle, right? The opposite line, which is the A here, the opposite line here, right? All over the hypotenuse. Then the hypotenuse is the longest side, which we have here. So we see hypotenuse here, the longest side, right? That's the hypotenuse. So the sine is the opposite over hypotenuse, right? So we call it so. And then when we consider cosine of the angle theta, that is what? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So that is what we have as B over C, right? Then when we consider the tangent, then it means that we are considering opposite over adjacent, right? So that is what we look at when we are considering the ratios in trigonometry. So basically, in this lesson, we have looked at the introduction to trigonometry, where we have considered what trigonometry is, which is basically the study of angles, triangles, basically right angle triangles, and the relationship that exists between their sides. And we've considered the trigonometric ratios. Basically, when we consider right angle triangles, what are the ratios with the angle in relation to the size? In our next lesson, we want to consider some applications of trigonometry. See you in the next lesson.